Again, thank you everybody for joining us today for today's V43 webinar. We also have a lot of important information we're going to lead off with regarding 911 that Isaac's going to kick us off with. But for those of you that don't know me, I'm Dan Rosenrausch, CEO here at Virtue. I'm joined by Sean, who's our support manager, Isaac and Matt, both on our T3 engineering team. All right, so today's agenda, again, we're going to be reviewing a lot of important details of the e911 and DLR. A lot of important stuff here. A lot of this is changing for Kerry's Law, Ray Baum's requirements. So we're going to be going over all of that to start today. And then after that, we're going to be going through all new V43 new features and then Q&A. During the webinar, if you do have any questions, just pop them into the questions tab. We're definitely going to open up some QA at the end to address them, but we'll also try and address them during the webinar as well. So with that, Isaac, I will hand it on over to you, man.
Thanks, Dan. Hey, everyone. Hope you're doing well. So the first bit here is going to be regarding 911 and DLR. And I'm sure you guys have seen these slides before and heard some of this, ran into a number of it and have some aggravation towards it, as do we. But with that being said, I just wanted to first go over what's required, how to set the things up, and make sure that, you know, your clients, their users, everyone is set, ready to go and safe and can make out the call as necessary with the provided details that are required. So in order for a domain to be considered DLR, the domain has to have at least one endpoint, and that is in the emergency endpoints in the inventory section of a domain. That domain must also have at least one address. Both of these in the endpoint and the address can be the exact same address, that's fine. And they do need to be validated. What I mean by that is when you go into an address or you create one, you need to click the validate button and then save. There's currently a bug that we are observing that is resolved in V43, so there's not much to worry about going forward. But if you ever go into one and attempt to make a change and just hit cancel, just undo that change, hit validate, and click save again. But in V43, we won't need to worry about that. Just a little tidbit there. Users must be assigned an emergency caller ID. So the user that's making the outbound call, make sure that they're assigned a caller ID. Sometimes they will not have that caller ID set, or it'll be set for legacy. And we want to make sure that that is applied to the user so that it goes out DLR. You can do so from the emergency endpoints. We will cover that. You can apply to all. The emergency caller ID that is an endpoint will prompt the user for an address selecting the domains by default. So when you're monitoring, when you're editing a user and you choose that DLR option from the emergency caller ID dropdown, you'll then be presented with what address do you want to assign to this user. So make sure you complete that whole step and fill that out. One tidbit about Legacy 911, as an industry standard, everyone's trying to push towards utilizing DLR. The caveat to that is if you have trunks currently are not supported through DLR at the platform level. If the PBX, the on-prem system, sends the DLR data to us, then we can forward that on and that would work just fine. But as it stands now, if you have a trunk, you will need to confirm that the emergency numbers legacy is set up and is provisioned correctly so you avoid those unprovisioned 911 calls. Boom. That's the next slide, Dan. All right, creating an endpoint. Go ahead.
I just said amazing. Thank you.
Boom. Okay, perfect. All right, so step one, you're going to add an endpoint and validate the address. So in the inventory, you're going to go into emergency endpoints. If there's not one there, you're going to add one. This is what the screen looks like. You give it the callback number. This is the number that's going to be sent to the emergency services if they need to return the call. So you only need one in a domain, but if you have multiple and you wish to assign different callback numbers to those people, you can do so, but it's not necessary. You then choose the billing address. If you have already built addresses in the domain, they will populate in this drop-down list. If not, go ahead and add a new one, fill out the information, and then a validate button down there at the bottom will highlight for you, validate it, and then it should change to save, and you click save. Boom. All right, so the next step is to assign the endpoint. All users, if you want to bulk assign, you can do so in that emergency endpoints option. There is the little button to apply endpoint there. As an individual, you can see there is the drop down once you edit the user. It will list the legacy numbers if they're there, and then below it will list the 10-digit. A note about the apply endpoint. There currently is no way to mass apply the endpoint and address. I'm sorry, mass apply the address to a user. When you do this through the endpoint, it is supposed to apply the address that endpoint is associating to the user. However, that is a bug that is resolved in 43. So going forward in 43, when you click apply endpoint to all, it's going to actually apply that address to them as well. Boom. Creating additional addresses. So if you need to build multiple addresses, as some of you certainly will, you go to the emergency addresses tab, and then you're just going to click add a whole bunch of times, fill out the information. What we're seeing here is when you build out a domain, so any new domain that is added will require this emergency tab to be filled out. You're going to enter the 911 caller ID number. That should be the same as the endpoint that you're going to select. If it's there, it should populate, but building a new one, obviously it won't be there. So you're going to fill that information out, fill out the address, fill all this. It's the same information that you've done if you've converted a legacy to DLR. It's all the same information. You click add. The bug where you have to add it here and then add it again and then add the address is gone in 43. I can hear the cheers and applause. So I hope everyone's happy about that. I know I am. So going forward in 43, when we run into this, you'll add it once. You won't have to add it again. You'll only have to add subsequent additional addresses and then make sure those get assigned to the correct users. Boom. Double boom. All right, so creating the additional addresses, I skipped ahead a little bit, but here is what that looks like, the address name. This is something that you want it to be identified as in the portal. Give it the caller name. If it's someone's personal or if it's the company, just fill in that information. That's the name, obviously, that is sent to emergency services. Then you want to provide that exact information where the location is, down to the room, the apartment number, whatever the case may be, the office number, and then click validate and save. Boom. All right, then you're going to assign the address to the user. In the user, when you edit, if you have that DLR emergency caller ID selected as we do there in that first screenshot, you'll be prompted to select an emergency address. That drop down has a number of options if they're filled out. If they're not, the add new address at the top will prompt you to input what we saw on the last screen in this user edit field. So you can do all that from there, and it will add that as a address specific to the user. Boom. Okay, that's what we got for 911 at the moment. I'm sure everyone's going to have some questions. We have a ton of things that I'm sure we missed and can go over, small little idiosyncrasies. But now we're going to go over some v43 new features, and just to kind of give everyone a heads up on what we're looking like for a release time frame. We're currently working on scheduling our test environment for v43. We're hoping to get that scheduled soon, and as soon as that gets scheduled, you'll see a maintenance alert. And once that one is scheduled, we will pre-schedule the Apollo cluster for v43 a week's time out. We want to let that burn in, make sure we don't run into any issues, and then we'll release it out to Apollo. So keep an eye out on that. We're hoping it's right around the corner. As I said, we're ready to rock and roll on it. We just have to actually get it scheduled and get it done on that test environment, let it burn in, and then you guys are absolutely next. So let's go ahead and keep going. Boom. Okay, so our first new feature is comfort message in the custom music on hold. So what this allows you to do is allows you to set custom messages to inject into the hold music. You can do so with a number of messages. You can create a list of them. As you see on the right-hand side, I only had one in there for my test. But just like answering rules and anything else, you can add multiple and then rearrange them based on the priority you want them to go through in that list. At the top of that little panel, you see there is a 30-second timer there. That's what I like to call the chime-in timer. So in this example, 30 seconds, it's going to chime in, play our first message, and then 30 seconds later, it's going to chime in and play the second message, go on down the list until we reach the bottom. Once we reach the bottom, we're going to repeat that list again, starting with 30 seconds. So you can adjust that. It's very similar to setting like a ring timeout and things of that nature for users and their call flows. So it's a very, very simple system there. And you can use text to speech, or if you have custom recorded messages, you can also upload those there. This can be done per user, and that is, queue or site, what have you. So every user can have a specific list of messages if they need, and then you can set those chime-in times different per user. Boom. All right, and then we have custom call center status. I think this is a big one that people have been asking for. You can create multiple statuses for agents to use. It's available both in the portal and web phone. And then when you run reports in the call center or tab on the portal, you can actually filter based on those specific statuses. So in order to set it up, when you navigate to that call center page, you have the option on the right for settings that pops up our first screenshot here on the left, where you can go to custom statuses and then you can build out your status list there. You would save it and then it's populated and ready to go. You can also build this out in the reports page. There is an option at the top that gives you this exact same settings page where you can build out more of them if necessary. So setting them up is in two different relatively similar places, but there are two different spots for you to do it if necessary, and they replicate between each other. So no need to worry about adding it in one place and it not being added somewhere else. When you are selecting it in the portal, it's just along with the rest of the pre-built status there. It's just at the bottom. You can see I've selected, or I've created coffee break, walking dog, watching a movie, and at the gym. I hope no one uses those except for coffee break and maybe walking the dog. And then also in the web phone, it's in the drop down at the top as well. So that's custom call center status. Is not a whole lot to it, but I think it really fills a void that was needed. I am going to turn this over to Sean, I believe, next. Oh, sorry, I forgot I had this one in here as well. In the call center report statuses, I'm glad that you hit this, Dan. I totally forgot I included this slide. It is in the table settings, so you do get a breakdown. You get to choose which of those you actually want to include in whatever report you're running, and then you can download those reports from there. But next slide, and that will be Sean. I'm gonna go ahead and turn that over to him.
Hey everyone. Got a few other good features. I think I picked out my favorites here on this one. I know domain-wide call recording has been requested for going on over 5 years now, I think, since we've started doing this one. What it does is it makes it obviously exactly like it says, domain-wide recording. You don't have to worry about the user being set to yes or no, or someone creating a new user and forgetting to put the user to actually have the drop down enabled for yes to capture that call, or a device for some reason wasn't set, a queue wasn't set. So it takes that guesswork out of it completely. When it's set to yes, like in the screen, this is editable from you when you build a domain or where you edit the main domain settings at the top right. Once that's set to yes, it actually will gray out all the other users and stuff like that. So that way that the setting becomes, like I said, a domain-wide recording. There is a checkbox though to hide the recording for users if that needs to be done still, but it's no longer a drop down the box, because that gets grayed out with this feature. This, like I said, again, regardless of the user settings or call queue, this would set on that and be good to go on that. pretty easy setting, obviously. It's a yes or no under the basic drop down, so pretty self-explanatory. Yep, and the next one, this is a huge one as well. This has been requested, and it ties back to actually the new DLR way of doing 911. As Isaac mentioned, you would have to normally go and set each of the users individually if it's like a multi-location deal, or for some reason you wanted to make a change, and versus applying to everyone as an endpoint. This now you'll be able to go check the boxes like you were able to before with the welcome emails, but now there'll be another option there for bulk editing. And you can actually see, you can now change the site, department, the scopes, caller ID, the caller ID name, the emergency caller ID, and the emergency address, dial permissions, area codes, pretty much anything to do with the user now can be performed mass, in bulk from the users. The way before, you were having to export like the user list, run through it in a spreadsheet, and import it back in. I mean, that's still available to you, but this makes it all being able to be done from the GUI. Again, though, the biggest part of this one is now being able to do the emergency caller ID and addresses, so that way you can actually apply it to the users. And I know, again, that's been a struggle for the DLR and the implementation, of course, coming from the legacy to these, and getting fined because of a user not being changed, but it applied it to most of them, or something got set as legacy, because once you go DLR, and apply that, it no longer is for legacy. You have to be sending it as DLR. So if it goes out as the legacy, that even if it says okay, that does not mean it's okay. If there's an emergency address in there, you need to be setting it as the DLR way and applying the endpoints and making sure all the users have the endpoints to avoid that $150 fine from the FCC. Again, definitely was a much needed feature here, and very easily helps with the DLR. Boom. Oh, thank you. Another one that I think that might be useful for a lot of people, for maybe doctors that have on-call lists, apartment complexes with maybe a maintenance department, or really anything that has like an on-call scenario where multiple people check voicemail and want to make sure that it actually gets covered. This will, as another one, it could be called persistent notifications, because that's exactly what it does. In my picture here, you can see that it does phone reminder and email reminders. By default, the only one that you will see on there is the email reminder, because that one doesn't take any UI config setup out the gate. It will use your default email address that you have set up when you create the note, normally your no reply at your domain name. When setting up the domain, it'll send it from that automatically, and depending on every 5 minutes, every whatever, I think it's 5, 10, 15, or 30 minutes, it'll send an email with with whatever you have, normally with an attachment. It also separates those now notification, because sometimes it was harder to see the leave as new, move to saved, or move to trash was kind of cut off in the drop down. So this kind of separates that out now. So it would need to be left as new. As soon as the message is changed to saved or moved to trash, that's when the notification stops. So same way as it was before, checking an email with attachment isn't going to stop these notifications. You would still need to make sure they go and access it, or from the portal to delete it, or call in. With the phone reminders, which obviously we have a support guide on of how to enable it, it has to be tied to a user, as well as one telephone number. So the reminder phone call is always coming from the same telephone number, and technically made outbound from the same user that applies to the domain. You can't do multiple. But with that, though, it will call them and say, would you like to check the message, read it back, and then give you the option to delete. So sometimes that might be an easier way. I'm still an email guy, though, so that way it sends me my email, I get it, and it'll just keep blowing me up until I go in and check the message, and then I can move it to trash. Like I said, this is going to be a big one for ones that kind of want that, they don't want a call center necessarily, or hire something like that. this just does it digitally. A lot of on-prem systems, not a lot, but a few on-prem systems had this persistent notification feature back in the day, and like I said, was one that's been heavily requested here. Can't wait to get these version 43 features out and get this released. I know you guys have been patient with us and a long time coming, trying to get this squared away from NetSapiens and make sure to release a good update with the least amount of bugs that could happen here. And like you said, we're trying to implement it somewhere first in another test environment, and then you guys will follow. Definitely follow us on our status page. And with that, though, I'll hand it over to my colleague Matt.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm going to be covering some unique call center features that are being added in v43. Currently today, if you look at the call center and you have a call queue set up, the calls have to just be answered in the order they came. But in v43, you now have an option to either pick up calls directly or move the calls to the front of the queue. So I'll give you a little hypothetical scenario. Let's say our call center is getting slammed today. There's a few people out. You have 20 callers waiting. All of our agents are busy. The call wait time is 20 minutes, and our call center supervisor gets an angry email from a customer saying they've been on hold for 20 minutes, they can't get through. They've been trying to call in all day. What your call center supervisor can do is log into the portal, go to the call center tab, find that call, and then use the arrow button on the screen to push that call to the front of the queue. Like I said, today, that call just has to sit there and wait the 20 minutes. You can't do anything with it. So now this is giving you an option, or your call center supervisor an option, to kind of reduce wait times and help VIP customers. If any of you have big call center clients, you know that the most important person is the call center supervisor. You have to keep them happy. Boom, next slide. All right, and kind of like I mentioned before, another option that you have is, let's say, instead of pushing the call to the front of the queue, let's say our supervisor wants to actually help out or take this call so that they make sure this customer that is angry is now helped out accordingly. They can actually go into the portal and pick the call up themselves. So this is probably a pretty big feature for, like I said, call center supervisors or managers that want to help out these VIP customers or angry customers that have been on hold waiting for a while. The other option is that they can, you can actually transfer the call to a specific agent. So instead of them taking the call themselves, they can transfer it over to their favorite agent or their agent that they know is going to handle the call correctly and get this customer taken care of. Like I said, these are some new features that are going to make those call center supervisors and managers very happy. All right, let's see. The next one here is tiered round robin. I personally never been a fan of round robin just because it pushes the wait times up. That's how it's designed. But I think this is going to be a new call queue option that kind of hits a good middle ground. As you see on the screen, I kind of describe it as a mix of a linear cascade and a round robin. It's going to have better control of which agents are actually going to ring in which order. Right now with a round robin, you add 10 agents and it just rings whichever one is the longest idle. But you can actually kind of narrow this down with different tiers. And in theory, it should allow you to reduce some of those wait times that you get with these round robin queues. So as you can see on the screen, kind of like a linear cascade, you can group agents into different tiers. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow you to decide which agents get the call first. Boom, go to the next slide, please. So every agent that is in tier 1, it's going to ring them based on the agent ring timeout timer that you set when you're making the call queue. So if there's 5 agents and the agent ring timeout is set to 10 seconds, it's going to ring each agent in tier 1 for 10 seconds before rolling over to tier 2. So for example, what this should do is any agent that's in tier 2 knows that when that phone rings them, this call's been ringing for 50 seconds, I might want to pick it up now. Same thing if it goes to tier 3 and tier 4. So in theory, that should allow you to reduce the actual wait time that you get with round robins instead of just ringing 20 random people in a more random order that it is with this option. But yep, that's it basically.
Awesome. Thank you, rest of the team. So now we want to move over just to shout out our support page. So if you guys aren't already there, hopefully you guys all are there already, but There's several hundred helpful articles on our knowledge base. So if you navigate to support.virtue.com, you can get access to all those articles. We'll also post this webinar recording when we're done, like we do all other webinars, and we usually throw the copies of the slides up there too. So anybody looking for previous webinars or just to rewatch this one, you can obviously always see them there. And then our Slack channel, if you're not within our Slack community yet, definitely join us there. You can just reach out to your channel manager. They can get an invite sent out to you so you can join the Slack community, but we're there. Vincent does Vibe Hours every Tuesday for our partner community at 10 a.m. He's also doing some more webinars now too, so you guys can have access to that stuff. So with that said, we just wanted to open it up to some QA. So if anybody has any questions, just throw them in. And for as many people that are in here, we do not have that many questions. So throw them into the questions bar there, and we'll try to get them answered for you. Got asked again, if probably somebody joined us late, webinar will be recorded. It'll be right in the support KB area that I just showed you there, so you can definitely get access there. Another question came in from Bill. Hey Bill, the new call center custom activity is only accessible from Snap Mobile and not Mobile Connect, correct? Isaac, you want to grab that one?
Yeah, the call, so I don't even, yes, web phone, Snap Mobile, correct. Go VoIP, no, because call center statuses and things are not supported there. And as such, Mobile Connect is also not going to be supported with those custom statuses.
All right, and then another question from another Bill was any plans for fixing hot desking? So yeah, we were told by, and I don't know if you guys can jump in for hot desking. So we were told by NetSapiens that they're going to make a vested effort in it with, I think it was 44. I don't think that was anything with 43. Any of the team can jump in on that?
It was 44 from what I remember hearing.
Yeah, we've definitely raised a ton of, I guess you can call them alarms in NetSapiens about the hot desking and how it should work. We actually spoke, I think James actually spoke to it from NetSapiens at Virtue Connect a bunch, if I'm not mistaken. But long story short, they're reworking that feature entirely, because the way it works now is just kind of not what most people have in mind when it comes to hot desking. So the conversation that we had with them last was they're reworking that feature entirely with the hopes to get it into 44. Nothing's been promised, but that was based off conversations we've had directly with their product team. Another question, just read through these. We have a couple. Okay, so Isaac, you might want to jump on this, but Christian had a question. So to clarify, if we have an emergency endpoint build and assign to all users and have an emergency address built, we do not need a legacy 911 number, correct? And if we just have a legacy number and no emergency endpoint or address, is that okay or no?
So if you have emergency endpoint, emergency address, and they are correctly validated and assigned to the user, you do not need legacy. That is correct. If you have DLR, so endpoint and address, and you have legacy, you should not run into any issues because the call will always be checked first for DLR. And as long as those first few criteria are met, that it is set up, configured correctly, validated, and we have all of that data confirmed, the call should go out DLR and should have no issue. The problem that we've run into is if for some reason, a bug or otherwise, the data is not there, the call will go out legacy. And then if you do not have legacy set up, it will fail because it does not match in bandwidth records as a provisioned address to that number. So unless you're using trunks, you want to configure your users for DLR when you can, in my opinion, as soon as possible. And then legacy will be ignored from there. So you shouldn't have to mess with it anymore. And then any new domains you build, just build them DLR. Unless you have trunks, then you need to add legacy. But outside of trunks going forward, it's recommended to just build DLR and leave it at that. I hope that answered the question. If not, and you have a further question on that, feel free to submit a ticket and we can go back and forth until we get it fully figured out and understood.
Perfect.
It is very confusing, I agree.
Yeah, and we got it perfect from Christian, so thank you, Christian. Go Birds. Another question we got was, will the v43 will V43 be released within the next 30 days, or is it more than that? So just to kind of iterate on what Isaac said, the goals, we're looking, we have to coordinate that obviously with some NetSapiens resources too. We have a test environment that has a few thousand users that we introduce first. It's already been running on our sandbox, of course. So we're trying to get that scheduled within the next week or so. As soon as it's live in that environment for 7 days and we don't uncover anything that we feel would be like catastrophic or a hurdle for us that we need to overcome before launch, we usually will pre-schedule the Apollo upgrade, which is what most of you guys are all on, for generally a week after that. We're going to try and shoot for the weekend. So it looks like at this point we're about 2.5 weeks out, but obviously that's barring anything crazy happening in between now and then, or us uncovering any bugs during the launch. But so far, NetSapiens has reassured us that this was by far their most thoroughly tested and QA'd version. We don't have anything, we haven't seen anything yet to dispute that, so we'll just keep you guys posted. Another question came in from Josh. What's up, Josh? And yeah, Christian, go Birds. With the new call recording updates, can you pull a report on which users have a call recording on them if it's not set to whole domain? And that's going to be, I think, you, Sean.
Sorry, I was mute. Yep, I was muted there. But yes, no, I don't believe there is a report to pull on that. You would kind of have to know, I guess, if you have all domain recording set, you would have to export your users and count how many users you have. That's where you would be billed for is all users.
Yeah, and we are working on, I won't spoil the surprise. It'll probably be part of our next webinar next month, but we are definitely working on, there's a pretty heavily, I think it's the top feature request of like billable reports and stuff within Vibe. So we're actively working on some stuff there. I won't ruin the surprise though. We'll talk about that more in a future webinar.
Yeah, to the reporting point, there may be some new parameters that they built into the API that they send back to us to let us know. I don't think that we've checked those. I know I personally haven't, so it's unlikely that they've included it as like a reporting option, but it might be something new that they've added on to like the subscriber model to let us know that it is a parameter that's been set. Something we can definitely look into.
All right, and then another question: how do you join your channel on Slack? So there's an invite. We have to just invite you. So just reach out to your channel manager, or you can just hit up support at Virtue and just ask for whatever email address you use for Slack. Just ask us to provide the invite link, and we'll send that right to you. All right. And it looks like that is the rest of the questions that I have not answered directly. Nope, I answered that one. Okay, cool. So if anybody, again, you have any further questions, as always, please feel free to open a ticket. All you have to do is call our 800 number 833-VIRTUE, 833-844-7883, or you can always open a ticket just by emailing us direct, support@virtue.com, and we'd be happy to help you out. But of course, as always, we're in that Slack channel trying to help the community, so you always feel free to DM us over there too. But talk to you guys soon. Thank you again for taking time out of your busy days to join this webinar, and again, have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.